Dit is maandag die 26ste Februarie. Ons gaan aan met Destiny. But there was a new problem. They had missed their scheduled rendezvous with the strike crafts. The emergency plan made allowance for a new rendezvous, the 180 nautical miles from the coast. Roughly 3 miles from the coast, Tom called a halt and the boats came alongside. Emergency plan, guys. For the first time since her rescue, Leslie Ann relinquished her hold on Tom. He got stiffly to his feet. Check the fuel. Not enough, he heard Snake say. Only 4 cans left. That gives me 60 to 80 miles. The other boats reported similar fuel statuses. Okay, let's go as far as we can and ask for a closer RV with the ships. And, Captain, here they come. What? Where? And Tom turned to look towards the open sea. White bow waves betrayed their speed as the 2 strike crafts raced to their rescue. Oblivious of their standing orders, they came to the rescue of the assault team. A loud cheer went up, and even Leslie Ann struggled to her feet to witness the arrival of the ships. Can you believe it? Tom whispered in surprise. Those guys are risking their ships and crew by coming to our assistance. Okay guys, let's roll to the RV and get on board. We are going to make it to tea time after all. Commander Rustus Hickman stood on the open bridge, staring at the recce teams through his binoculars. His premonition that something went wrong appeared to be justified. There were only 3 barracudas visible. His decision to approach the coastline was echoed by Commander Dave Kellerman, and the hunch paid off. They lost a boat, he said, to no one in particular, and next to him Lieutenant Jesse Stein tensed. If there were any wounded, they would be brought to the SAS Frans Erasmus, to her well-prepared theatre in the officers' mess, and Dean would have to come to assist. But at the gap closed, she saw the smiling faces, made a quick count of the men aboard the barracudas. They were all there, and then she saw Leslie Ann, held tightly in the arms of Captain McLachlan. Leslie Ann waved at the ship, smiling, and a huge cheer went up from the ship's crew. The mission was successful. They got the girl out safely. All the off-watch crew members and even those who could desert their posts for the moment were gathered around their captain at the safety rail when the barracuda came alongside. Then Tom and Ben helped her up the climbing ropes to the deck, and they started cheering and clapping with shouts of "Jolly good show" and "Welcome home, Leslie." Jessie immediately wrapped a blanket around her and led her off to the officer's mess. "My poor girl, look at what you are wearing." And then Leslie Ann started to giggle, softly at first, then louder and louder until she was laughing hysterically. That was when Jessie realized that she was actually crying. The tension and shock of the rescue mission, and now the relief, became too much, and she injected her with a strong sedative and put her to bed. The state president paced his office. There was a worried expression on his face as he glanced at his watch for the upteenth time. "Nothing?" he asked with a silent trace of agitation. General Oxdirand shook his head. "Nothing, Mr. President." "I believe that military intelligence has already departed with General Bomba." "Yes, sir. They should be close to Maun by now." "I don't want Bomba released. It will definitely create the impression that we are more than willing to negotiate with terrorists. Every delusioned enemy will start abducting our people," the state president mused with a note of desperation. The internal pressure for the release of Lieutenant Roberts was huge, and for the sake of political survival, he had no choice but to continue with the prisoner exchange program. For that very reason, he had authorized the Special Forces to collect all relevant information and mount a late-hour rescue mission. If they were successful, he would happily send Bomba back to his prison cell in Kaikanagap. But time was running out, and they still had no news of the success or failure of the mission. A large press contingent was gathered at the adjoining newsroom, awaiting news on the progress of the prisoner exchange. If only he could walk in there and announce that Lieutenant Leslie Ann Roberts was rescued by a crack team of Special Forces operators, it would be a political coup. It would boost the morale of the party members and the military. It would be huge. It would be perfect. He glanced at the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who was glumly leaning back in his armchair. He was annoyed because the state president had kept the rescue mission a secret from him and his department. He only learned about the mission 30 minutes ago. With respect, Mr. President, he had growled, I must object to this most improper behavior. Foreign Affairs is my department, and therefore the exchange of prisoners my responsibility. Did you know about this, Mani? The Minister of Defence shook his head. No, Pick, I did not, but I do understand the President's need for the utmost security, and the use of the Special Forces by the President is nothing new. I am still unhappy about this secrecy. Oxdurant shook the last Lexington from his crumbled packet, lit it and sighed. It was already close to 10 o'clock and there was still no word from the strike crafts. But he knew that he would receive the call from the Special Forces headquarters the moment contact had been established. The call came at 7 minutes past 10 and Ox jumped from his seat in the office of the President's secretary. He answered and listened for several minutes that felt like an eternity before replacing the handset. He opened the door to the State President's office quietly and closed it behind him. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was busy pouring himself a whiskey from the decanter on the trolley, still proclaiming his unhappiness with the situation. Mr. President, General Oxdurant announced, and an expectant silence fell over the office. The mission was successful. Lieutenant Leslie Ann Roberts is safe and unharmed aboard the strike craft. No injuries or losses to the assault team. Thank God, the President exclaimed as relief washed over his face. He sank to the chair behind his desk. Mani, this calls for a celebration. I will have a KWV 20-year-old on the rocks. And then everyone was laughing as the tension was broken. They toasted each other and Ox couldn't help but to grin at his show of success. Even Pick gulped down his whiskey and poured another. Ox, the President said, this was your operation and you know what to do. General Durant nodded and left the office. Please get the Chief of Military Intelligence on the line, he asked the secretary, who lifted the handset and punched in the required dials. Yanni, he said over the phone, President's orders. The exchange is off. You can order your plane back from Maun. Bomba must be returned to his cell. 10 minutes later, the state president walked into the newsroom. Unexpected silence descended upon the waiting journalists. Something significant had happened. Television cameras focused. Communications were going live to the respective broadcasting network worldwide. The president began. In the early hours of this morning, a crack Special Forces team launched an assault on the Swapo Rehabilitation Center at Bora de Kwanza, just south of Luanda, Angola. The aim of the mission was to rescue Lieutenant Leslie Ann Roberts. She was kept prisoner under appalling conditions after she was abducted by SWAPO terrorists almost 2 years ago. It is now my pleasure to announce to you that Lieutenant Roberts was successfully rescued this morning and is unharmed and safe. There were no losses to own forces. Chapter 15. Maun Airport, Botswana. Brigadier Harrison Pout stared at the message. One sentence. Return to Windhoek immediately. Package exchange cancelled. Scribbled on a notepad, the message was delivered to him by an airport official only minutes ago. The message didn't explain, but required him and his cargo to return to Windhoek with immediate effect. How can it be? He muttered quietly, his mind working overtime. He was very much aware that General Momba could get off the plane and walk away, and this was neutral ground in Botswana. There were no means to secure him. And if Bomba walked off the plane, his carefully laid plans might be in danger. So what now? And it hit him. Bomba must go with him. Bomba would have to go with them to Kasinga and retrieve the diamonds. His plans would remain in place, except that Bomba would accompany him. Extra security, he thought, as he slowly crumbled the note in his fist. He could feel their eyes on him, the crew, his followers, and those of Bomba. He shrugged nonchalantly, and it's nothing. We shall depart on the next leg of the journey to Kasane. He glanced across to the general, but Bomba seemed calm and at ease, suspecting nothing. And he nodded at the pilots. They knew what he meant. Time for Plan B. As soon as the King Air was airborne, it turned west in the direction of Windhoek, and Bomba looked up in alarm. Why are we flying west? We should be going east. Without a word, Harrison handed him the crumbled note that ordered them back to Southwest Africa. Bomba read it twice, blood draining from his face. You have betrayed me, he rasped. Calm down, General, replied Harrison. That was the orders we received. I do not intend to follow them. What do you mean? Just a change of plan. Instead of dropping you off at Kasane, we are now going to fly to Rundu, refuel, and off we go to Kasinga. Bomba stared dumbfounded at him. You intend to recover the diamonds now? Harrison nodded. And you, my dear General, can get off at Kasinga. But you are crazy. It's too dangerous, and besides, they will suspect that something went down, that the only reason why you dropped me there was because of the diamonds. And how did you intend to explain the missing diamonds? If you were in fact exchanged this afternoon, I would have argued that the South Africans took it. But if I pitch up there, they will know. Why else would you risk your own safety and that of the plane? Then there remain only one solution, said Harrison with finality. You go with us, all the way. There is more than enough diamonds for you as well. Bomba didn't reply, but returned to stare out of the window. He turned to stare out of the window. The Angolan representative was shocked to learn that the prisoner exchange had been cancelled at such a late stage by the South Africans. Lacking information, all he could do was to make a long-distance call to Luanda and explained the situation. Also that General Bomba returned with his captors. Half an hour into the flight, the pilot made a steep descent, leveling out a treetop height, leaned forward and switched the transponder off. Then he turned to the nose of the plane north towards Rundu and the Angolan border. They entered Southwest African airspace under the radar, and when the King Air parked on the tarmac at Rundu Air Force Base, they encountered a rather baffled officer on duty. Who are you and where do you come from? The second lieutenant demanded, standing hands akimbo, trying to exaggerate more power and influence. Harrison flashed his military ID card and the second lieutenant deflated instantly, coming to attention and salute. Brigadier, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize and there were no incoming flights logged. And I don't expect you to know. The flight is top secret, military intelligence. Harrison held up a brown envelope to ensure the significance of them being there. I want to keep it this way. No unnecessary questions and no chit-chat of what you see and hear. Absolutely, sir. The 19-year-old second lieutenant blurted. My lips are sealed. Anything you need, just ask, sir. This plane runs on Jet A1, Lieutenant. Get it filled up. Yes, sir. Harrison turned back to the plane, staring at General Bomba, who appeared a little sick. And now, General, it is decision time. Either you continue with us, or I'll hand you over to the local military police. I will go with you, replied the General in an unnatural soft voice. You don't leave me too much of a choice. Good man, Harrison said and held out his hand. Partners? Partners, replied Bomba as he took the offered hand. Then he laboriously got out of the plane and lighted a cigarette. I think I would love some luxury living after the couple of years in Kaikanagap. It took them 45 minutes to refuel. It was when he had to complete the log that the attendant noticed that the registration number appeared slightly off-center and askew. On closer inspection, he noticed that the registration number ZCGJV was in fact an overlay, as if the older one had been recovered in a hurry. But he shrugged it off. Nothing important though. The King Air taxied to the far end of the runway, and as the pilots braked to do their final checks, Lieutenant Jeremy Carg exited the plane and ripped off the plastic overlay. The registration number now read ZGKW. So it's KW at the end instead of JV. As the King Air lifted from the runway, it started running north, and the field attendant noticed with surprise that the registration numbers had changed. But he also remembered the second lieutenant's warning that the passengers were from military intelligence. Nonetheless, he made a note of it. While waiting for a return flight to Gaborone, the Angolan representative heard the devastating news that King Air ZSGJV bound for Windhoek had mysteriously disappeared off the radar. There were no transporter signals, and the immediate general concern was that the plane went down in the thick Botswana bush over a largely unpopulated area, maybe even in the Okavango Delta. The news of the aborted prisoner exchange did not come as a surprise to Mamba. After all, the bargaining chip was lost, snatched from under his nose, and he should have foreseen the possibility of just such an action. He should have moved the prisoner to Luanda the previous day, but thanks to the stinginess of the SWAPO High Command, they had refused his request. And now he sat with the humiliation and with egg on his face. The news of the disappearance of the plane, however, shocked him and the SWAPO community. An emergency meeting was called by his immediate superiors. This is just terrible, Greenwell Matongo exclaimed, a look of sadness on his face. Instead of a victory round by our famous General Bomba, we shall now probably have a remembrance service. He sacrificed everything for the cause. Amambu contributed. How many years did he spend in the Boer dungeons? Political Commissioner Intombi lifted the kuka beer to his lips. His mind, deviously busy as always, thinking out new strategies and ways to outsmart friends and enemies alike. It was his job to scheme, motivate, and even undermine when necessary. You remember our previous meeting when we discussed the exchange procedures? They nodded. Well, we were already doubtful whether or not General Bomba had perhaps let the existence of the diamonds slip. He neglected to inform us about the whereabouts of his very important cargo. He paused for effect, the others watching him closely. Maybe dying in an aviation accident is not a bad idea. What are you talking about? Amambu asked angrily, clearly flabbergasted by the ominous, devious suggestions by the political commissar. Itombi stared at him, lifted his bottle in a salute. To a true martyr. The three stared at him, not understanding completely. Instead of a disgraced General Bomba, Itombi said quietly, because of the lost diamonds, he died a martyr at the hands of the South Africans. Greenwell stared thoughtfully at him, a new light in his eyes. I agree. It would be better to declare him a martyr rather than a thief and a traitor. Now what about the diamonds? Commander Amambu, I think we dispatch Comrade Bamba with due haste to Kasinga and have every square inch of soil for hundreds of meters searched. We knew he was captured north of the abandoned base. If the diamonds are still there, we shall find it. Mamba cleared his throat. The humiliation of the previous night's failure had rekindled all his hatred for the Boers again. I had rather contemplated a return to active battle, Comrade Greenwell. I have a score to settle. There will be more than enough time. Who else can we trust to find and secure the diamonds? Comrade Greenwell, your wish is my command. But then, once I have finished this search, whether successful or not, you must promise me an immediate return to active combat. Bear in mind, Comrade Mamba, that Kasinga is now desolated and even Teka Mutete abandoned. Only the local population and militia remained. The focus of the battle has removed towards Kwitu, Ambambu explained. But we still have elements of support at Kuvilai. There are helicopters at Matala. I'll exert all the power to persuade the Cubans to fly you and your special unit team to Kasinga, but more likely to Teka Matete. Mamba rose respectfully. I will catch the Illusion IL-76 routine flight this evening to Lubanga and will be at Matala by 8 in the morning. Thank you, comrade, Ambambu said. One day, you shall be rewarded with a position in the new Namibian government. I will talk to President Mjoma myself. The Atlantic weather favored them, and Rustus Hickman didn't hesitate to order the strike crafts to proceed at full speed ahead, south to the invincible line that formed the border. There was a festive mood under the sailors and soldiers aboard the SAS Franz Erasmus. The success of their mission was embodied in the presence of Leslie Ann Roberts, snatched by them a bare 20 hours previously, and the ships were flying across the calm, flat ocean. The subject of their delight had finally woken up from her deep sleep, and now sat snugly next to Tom on the bunk of the officer's mess, holding his hand tightly under the table. And she couldn't stop smiling, the exhilaration of her unexpected freedom almost too much to imagine. I got the shock of my life, she babbled away. When through the dust and smoke I saw this man coming for me, and he said he was Tom, I didn't understand. It only came to me later. From across the table, Jessie smiled encouragingly at her, knowing how important it was to talk. to clear her system of the initial shock. And when we reached the boat, I realized that it was indeed my people and Tom. I couldn't speak, I just held on for dear life. How he got me into the boat, I still don't understand. Tom laughed. You almost weigh nothing, and I just dragged you along. But I must admit, Smiley gave me one hell of a heave. Jessie could see it in their eyes, the unspoken love and the excitement and the happiness of the moment. Leslie Ann ate well earlier, and she certainly appeared stronger than the day before. When Tom had come to the officers' mess soon after she had woken up, Jessie had left the two of them alone for half an hour. Then she had hustled Tom out of the compartment, and the two women had spent the next hour or so preparing. Tom couldn't imagine what they did, but when he was finally allowed back in the mess, he could hardly recognize the girl he had helped to rescue the previous evening. Clearly, Jessie must have brought a whole bag of magic with her, and Tom could only stare at Leslie Ann. Her hair was neat and tidied in a single ponytail, and her makeup was just enough to soften the lines of the hardships she had endured, and she was dressed in a new uniform. Leslie Ann was still talking non-stop when Rustus Hickman entered the mess. The Oryx helicopter will be over the AFT deck in 35 minutes. How many packs, Tom? The 8 members of the assault team, myself included, and Johnny, Leslie Ann, Jessie, and Dr. Dean give us a total of 12. The remainder of the recce's will continue on board the ship until you have reached Saldanha Bay. Rustus nodded. Good. Have everybody ready on the AFT deck as soon as we reduced speed. Thank you, Captain, Tom said. And congratulate the crew from all of us on the job well done. Rustus grinned. It was great to be part of the mission. Leslie Ann, good luck for the days ahead. I can only imagine that it will be hectic, and hopefully we'll see you soon again. That is, in South Africa, of course. Tom was the last to scramble aboard the Oryx and worked his way in next to Leslie Ann. He recognized Major Dan Pienaar, the chief pilot, as soon as they lifted off. After closing the doors, the flight engineer handed him a headset. Major, Tom spoke into the microphone. Thanks for the lift home. Welcome aboard, Tom, and as always, it's a pleasure. By the way, your rescue mission is all over the news, even internationally. You guys are heroes, not to mention Leslie Ann. South Africa is waiting for her arrival. We only did our jobs, Major. What is our estimated time of arrival? We need to refuel at Rocky Point. A Dakota flew in with fuel earlier. From there we shall fly to Ondangwa. And even there everyone is awaiting your arrival. I believe we should be there in about 3 hours' time. As I understand, the President's Falcon will be waiting to take Leslie Ann to Pretoria. Drop us at the fort, then we'll miss the attention. But it didn't happen. Major Dan Pienaar landed the Oryx helicopter on the main apron and arrival area at the Ondangwa Air Force Base. When the door opened, even Tom stared in surprise. The apron was lined by hundreds of servicemen based at or near Ondangwa. A small reception party was waiting at the nearby parked presidential jet. Courage, he whispered into Leslie Ann's ear as he helped her from the helicopter. The remainder of the passengers remained seated, and Tom walked with her to the reception committee. Falling deliberately behind to allow her the attention. The crowd started cheering as she came into full view, and she glanced quickly back at Tom, who smiled encouragingly back. Go, he urged, and know that I love you. The Minister of Foreign Affairs stepped forward to welcome her back on home soil while the journalists jostled each other for a better view and more impressive photos. Tom recognized General Oxtirand standing with Major Fourie, officer commanding at Fort Fire, behind the minister. He stopped and lifted his right hand to his maroon beret in a firm salute. The compass rose clearly visible at his fingertips. The minister embraced Leslie Ann, talked quietly to her before turning to Tom and his men, who had formed up a few paces behind him. "Captain," he said, "on behalf of the President and the whole nation, I am thanking you and your men for a job brilliantly done." "Thank you, Minister," he replied and saluted again. He watched as the minister boarded the plane with Leslie Ann for the flight to Pretoria, feeling at a complete loss for losing her again so soon. He stood watching as Dean and Jessie boarded the plane as well, and only once the Falcon started rolling towards takeoff did he walk to the waiting SAML truck to take him and his team to Fort Fire. Goed, ons gaan môre weer aan met Destiny. Geniet die res van jou aand.